Hi, and welcome to Pride Action TV. My name is Joshua Oakes, and I'm the Digital Policy Manager for the Pride Action Tank and the AIDS Foundation of Chicago. We want to tell you a little bit about Pride Action Tank today. So Pride Action Tank is an organization that addresses challenges facing individuals and groups within Chicago's LGBTQ communities through a mixture of advocacy and action. The work of Pride Action Tank focuses on 6 overlapping issue areas, including housing, health, safety, financial security, youth, and aging. You can see our information there on the screen. You can visit us at www.prideactiontank.org and also find us on Facebook and Twitter. It's Pride Action Tank for both of those. Like and follow us on there to find out what's going on in the community and with Pride Action Tank. So today we have Representative Mike Quigley joining us today. Congressman Quigley is the U.S. Representative for Illinois' 5th Congressional District, which includes much of Chicago's north side and several western suburbs. He was elected to Congress in 2009. In addition to being a member of the House Committee on Appropriations, he is the Vice Chair of the Congressional LGBT Equality Caucus. In that role, he has led the charge to change the outdated and discriminatory FDA policies on banning gay and bisexual men from donating blood. And that's what we're going to have a conversation about today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Show.
Great to be here.
So I want to give a little bit of of kind of a brief overview of what the issue is, and then I'm going to pass it over to Congressman Quigley to kind of give his perspective on the issue. So for the viewers at home, in 1983, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration instated a lifetime blood donation ban for gay and bisexual men. This lifetime ban was in a response to a high number of HIV transmissions that resulted from HIV in the blood supply before HIV was identified or a test was developed to detect it. Shortly thereafter, as scientists started to better understand HIV and develop a test to detect it in person's blood, gay rights activists and others attempted to get the FDA to refine blood donation policies to reflect contemporary science. For decades, these efforts were largely unsuccessful. Finally, under the increasing pressure to act, the FDA decreased the lifetime ban to a 1-year waiting period from last sexual contact with another man. While the change from a lifetime ban to a 1-year ban seems like a step in the right direction, the FDA's policy remains a de facto blanket ban against gay and bisexual men and does little to reduce stigma and harm experienced by that community. More importantly, the policy does not fully embrace the available science that we have, and also the policy does not reflect or reinforce public health messages from the actual routes of HIV transmission or maximize the safety of the blood supply. So with that all being said, can you tell us kind of a little bit of your perspective of why is this issue important to you? Why is it important to Illinois?
Yeah, I've lived in the Lakeview community for 34 years now. And in that time period, a lot of my friends in the gay community would experience a family tragedy, or there'd be a national disaster. And there's always shortages of life-saving blood. And what I would hear over and over again is their personal experiences of rushing to the aid of a family member or the community, as we saw with the Pulse Nightclub disaster, the tragedy. And they were told they can't donate blood, and indeed there was a lifetime ban. The resulting reaction was typically embarrassment, anger, confusion, coming to me and saying, what can be done about this? So in 2010, then Senator Kerry and I joined in a letter to the FDA asking them to end this discriminatory policy. And it is a slow-moving process, to say the least. We've seen some progress, but we're still, unfortunately, at a situation in which they're basing these decisions on orientation and not risk behavior, which is far more appropriate. We have a ways to go. If there's anything that can come out of this Orlando tragedy, that's good. It is hopefully the accelerated pace of changing this discriminatory policy and making the country more just, more fair, as well as providing much more life-saving blood to those who need it.
Great. Can we talk a little bit about the movement to a 1-year ban and with technology advances in detecting HIV and other blood-borne diseases? does even a 1-year ban even make sense? Like, does it make sense to even move to that? What do you understand is like the reasoning for doing that?
First, I think for the FDA and HHS, this has been, to a certain extent, a learning process. Keeping a safe blood supply is absolutely essential. Changing it, given that it's operated through the private sector, right, the blood banks, the Red Cross, and so forth, is far more complicated than we had ever imagined. But there is no scientific basis for a 1-year deferral or a 2-year deferral or a lifetime deferral. It is extraordinarily arbitrary. And let's put it this way. We all know people who are in 20, 30-year monogamous long-term relationships in the gay community. For them, what makes absolutely no sense is here they are practicing safe sex, here they are, they're monogamous, and they have almost zero risk, yet they can't give blood. While someone else, perhaps a straight person who has multiple partners, isn't practicing safe sex, has no such deferral. That's a problem. So we recognize this inconsistency and understand that has to change. You mentioned this policy came about for a time for those of us who were there during an extraordinary, tumultuous 80s AIDS crisis. A lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty. That obviously has changed. The testing is nearly 100% in a very short period of time. The questionnaires can do much more to screen out those who shouldn't be giving blood. So we're at a point where science tells us to go forward, and a 1-year deferral makes absolutely no sense. In short, this decision should be based on risky behavior, not orientation. We're going to get there.
It looks like we actually have a caller on the line. So just a reminder, there is a call-in number, 312-738-1060. So if you have any questions for the Congressman, please give us a call in. But it looks like we have a caller. What's your question, caller?
Good evening. If the certain administration is that way about blood, what about when it comes towards donations? You know, when a person died, when it comes towards the kidneys and liver and heart, and even what parts of the eye, like the cornea and all that, are they the same way about that? Because one body may be able to help as many as 20 people.
No, that's absolutely true. When we talk about this, we first think of blood because there's a crisis out there and we need blood. And when tragedies like Orlando take place, unfortunately, when there's a natural disasters, we have a hurricane hitting Florida right now, you see a dramatic need for increased amounts of blood. But the same sorts of issues play out in donating tissues and organs, such as you have talked about. So we're working on that on the same basis with FDA and HHS. It's a slightly different track, and the science is a little different, but your point is well taken. It has to be part of this equation as well. And you're right, it is life-saving.
That's great. Thank you so much, caller, for that. Okay, so we don't have any other callers at the moment, so just a reminder, feel free to call in to ask the Congressman any questions at 312-738-1060. But I wanted to go back to something you kind of talked about a little bit earlier, which was risky behavior, or the risk-based behavior. And you have said that a risk-based assessment, an individual risk-based assessment, is more should become part of the donation process. So can you speak more about why this risk-based assessment is more scientifically sound than the current policy?
Yeah, science tells us that IV drug use, unsafe sex, transfusions, or multiple transfusions, this increases the risk of any blood being safe. We understand that with some degree of precision. Someone's orientation has far less to do with this. It's whether or not they're practicing safe sex. Again, I talked about someone who's not practicing safe sex, who has multiple partners, be they gay or straight, are far greater risk. IV drug use. And we need to appreciate that the screening process is absolutely critical. We're talking about the ability to pass on Zika now and other blood-borne diseases that are extraordinarily important and extraordinarily dangerous. So the process for screening is critical, but it makes no sense to be, in a sense, contradictory when we're not taking science into consideration. Again, my recent discussions with FDA and HHS, it is clear to me that they understand that and they respect this and that they're moving toward a change.
That's great. So can I ask then, since you've had lots of conversations with the FDA and been part of this process for a while, why wasn't or was those scientific advancements taken into consideration when they moved from a lifetime to a 1 year, and why then just go to a 1 year? What was there not enough information for them to feel comfortable? Was it pushback from the community or from the healthcare industry? Like, what was it that got them to a year but not past it?
Yeah, when we first started working on this policy, very shortly they changed and started talking about the fact that their policy in their minds was suboptimal. Several years ago, the American Medical Association said that this policy should be, as we have said, be based on behavior, risky behavior, and not on orientation. It has been a slow process. It is one based on science. Since we've been prodding them with these calls, letters, and meetings over this period of time, they have completed at least 4 thorough studies on this. Again, I think moving them in the right direction. I think there are still things about how blood is donated that makes this difficult for them to change issues. I don't want to say it's okay for them to take this long, but at least if I try to understand it, a large part of this seems to me be part of the process in how blood is donated. There is, as you might understand, a very significant questionnaire that goes into this. And I think that the FDA is trying to understand why people answer questions the way they do. Despite the fact that they are somewhat protected and insulated, I think there are those people who are unlikely to answer questions which perhaps they feel bad about this, right? They've been unfaithful to their partner. They used drugs in the past. There's something else there that they're not willing to talk about and perhaps even acknowledge to themselves. Frankly, I think the FDA is struggling with that. I think the science that they're working on right now is, why do people answer questions the way they do? How can the questionnaire be better? I think the other thing that FDA and HHS are working on is how they do the sampling, the testing that they do on this. I'm not a scientist nor am I a doctor, but from what I understand, the pools and how many samples they take in a larger group of samples they take can actually reduce the risk even more. And I think that's what they're working on to get closer to an answer here.
That's great. Thank you for that. So it looks like we have another caller on the line. So caller, do you have a question for the Congressman?
Hello. Yes. Hi. I've been listening to the show, and I'm curious to know what evidence or data the FDA puts forward to justify keeping the 1 year ban in place. Do they have hard data or evidence, or what do they produce when you ask why this is necessary?
Yeah, we haven't really gotten any data from them, and it's a very fair question that says that the 1 year deferral is safer. I think that this is an internal issue in which their scientists are going back and forth on this with the entire community. We're in a very critical period right now where they have asked for information. This is a period of time on the rule that they've asked the community to provide greater information. I'm very optimistic because of this. I'm hoping that at this time, points that you're talking about, the real hard data, the real analysis of this will come out, and the real science will show that the most appropriate way to review this process, the most appropriate way to screen blood is science-based, based on risk and the fact that we have dramatically improved testing programs that are screening blood and doing a far more effective job. So I can't defend the rationale that they're using. We have to work within this system. But I do think that the most recent announcements that they're asking for input and scientific input will bear out your point and will move in the right direction.
Great. That's actually a good segue to what one of my next questions was. So for those who don't know, that recently the FDA has announced that they will review the change of the policy to a 1 year ban. review and are accepting comments currently about that ban. So can you talk a little bit more about, if you've got more details to fill in, but also what role do you or does Congress expect to play in that process?
Part of what my job is to encourage the scientific community, the medical community, to provide good, solid science to the FDA to bear out these points. This is a critical period of time where anybody in the United States and all the universities and research groups can provide the data that's absolutely critical to this decision. We're hoping that the blood banks are involved, the American Medical Association is involved, but again, this is a critical period of time where they're reviewing this rule. It will afford us an opportunity to make this change, hopefully before the administration changes in Washington, D.C.
That's great. So I have kind of a question going back to the risk-based assessment a little bit is, as we know, there's new science, there's new technologies, there's new prevention technologies, and one of those technologies is PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis. And for our viewers who don't know what PrEP is, so PrEP is a once a day pill that is taken to be almost 100% proven, almost 100% effective to preventing HIV. It's a regimen that you take on every day. It's for people who are HIV negative to stay that way. Is PrEP as a prevention tool, and in the risk assessment kind of component, is the use of new prevention technologies other than condoms being taken into account of this, or should it be?
You know, it should. I think, though, we have to recognize that it is not foolproof. It is an aid in prevention, which is the most important part of PrEP. We have to recognize that, again, no one's perfect, and occasionally there are going to be those who don't stay on their medication all the time, or those who make mistakes, and that's extraordinarily important. I can't stress enough how people should continue to use condoms, especially when they're not as familiar with their partner, and also aid in the prevention of spreading other STDs. But to answer your question, it will be helpful. It is important, but it is not something that rules out any sort of risk. Just because people, as we know with any medication, they're not 100% in taking it.
So just a reminder, this is a call-in show, so we'd love to hear from you. Give us a call. Let us know if you have any questions or comments for the Congressman on this topic. The number is 312-738-1060. So we've got about 7 more minutes, so please give a few more calls. But I kind of wanted to end with the last two questions that I had. We mentioned Pulse Nightclub a little bit earlier, and as an LGBTQ member of the LGBTQ community and a survivor of a hate crime, it hit me kind of close to home. And the inability for me to be able to donate blood has been has been something that has bothered me for a very long time. And I know that it bothers a lot of people in this community and outside of this community. So I wanted to kind of get your perspective on Pulse and what that means for pushing this forward. What is the community able to mobilize around? Is that something that they're able to find some power in to have this conversation on a larger scale? Is that something that legislators will look at and realize that tragedy is a reason for this to be lifted? And the FDA, are they looking at that? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, it reminds me of why I got engaged in this issue in the first place. As I described it, my dear friends who could not donate blood after a family emergency or traffic accidents or a national disaster. The resiliency of the American people, and particularly the LGBT community, is extraordinary. I mean, they're there when they're needed. I'm very proud of them for this. The cruel irony of Orlando to me was that the community was targeted. This is why this happened there. And the community responded to defend each other, to protect each other, to help each other during this extraordinarily horrible event. Yet they were not allowed to help. That cruel irony amplifies why this needs to change. And I think it has helped lawmakers and community activists understand. I think a lot of people weren't aware of this issue. until Orlando. The gay community is not allowed to donate blood. So again, I guess the most important thing I can say about Orlando is if there's something good that comes out of it, let it be that we end this discriminatory policy.
I completely agree. Thank you for that. So we've got 5 more minutes. Like once again, we have some more time for probably one more call if somebody wants to give a call in. But I wanted to end the conversation today about getting the community involved. And so I know that Congress is doing a lot. There was a letter that was sent to the FDA from the House of Representatives and from the Senate encouraging them to remove the ban. But what can advocates, what can people on the ground, activists, community members do to make a change within this policy?
Yeah, look, elections matter, elections matter, elections matter. Beyond the discriminatory practices here that we are going to change, we still face discrimination on other all sorts of aspects of our life. Getting the right people elected is really going to be important. In the meantime, let your lawmaker know how you feel about this issue, your congressman, your senator. Tell your friends in other states if your congressman is already doing the right thing. Ask them to get involved in this issue. But beyond that, in the end, this is about science and what we think about science as well, and we have to respect it. We've seen in previous elections just how horrific some of our lawmakers can be. I serve with people who don't believe in climate change. I serve with people who don't believe in evolution. This hurts us when it comes to birth control, when it comes to women's reproductive rights. It hurts us on a lot of other issues like climate change. So we need to get people who care about science and making science-based decisions in Springfield, in D.C., and in the White House. And you can make a difference by letting your lawmaker know how you feel and making sure you vote.
Great. Looks like we have one last caller. We've only got a few minutes, caller, so let's do a quick question. Go ahead.
Yes, actually, you stole my question about what we in the community can do, but really, there's just a growing frustration about this ban, and basically, what's stopping a person from lying and saying that they aren't gay and giving blood? I mean, there's no background check, I imagine.
Yeah, I guess my point would be it's never a good idea to lie about these in these questionnaires. They do matter. There are other questions on there that are important, and I certainly don't want to be one that advocates that. I'm a strong proponent of changing the policy, and I'm convinced we're going to get there. But if we start to lie about one aspect of our life on these questionnaires, what's for people to say that they won't lie about other aspects, again, of their behavior? And if your behavior is risky behavior, it doesn't matter if you're gay or straight, you shouldn't give blood. If you're using IV drugs, if you're having unsafe sex, you should not be donating blood because you're putting other people at risk. But if you're not engaged in risky behavior, regardless of your orientation, you should be allowed to give blood and save other people's lives.
Great. I think that's a perfect end to the conversation today. Thank you so much,
Thanks so much
Congressman, for being here.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. So I want to go back to this. Is some information about the Pride Action Tank. In the last minute, I just want to encourage you to go to our website, www.prideactiontank.org, and visit us on Facebook and Twitter. There's a lot of great information on there, including a job fair, an LGBTQ job fair that's being held and presented by the Windy City Times that we're partnering with. There's a lot of great information on that, how you can get a booth if you're a company that or an organization that is hiring, or if you're looking for a job that is LGBTQ inclusive and in an LGBTQ competent and inclusive environment. Please come to that. Look for some information on the website for that. Thank you so much once again, Congressman, for being here, and we hope to have you on again. There are many issues that the Equality Caucus is working on that I know that we're working on as well. So till the next topic.
Look forward to it.
Right, thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much. Take care.
Thank you.